For centuries, royalty followed a dangerous recipe: power, legacy, and blood. But beneath the velvet robes and marble statues was an unspoken rule: keep the bloodline pure. In the courts of Europe, where love was optional and genetics were strategy, marriages became contracts between cousins, uncles, and nieces. The result? Not just kingdoms preserved, but bodies and minds slowly unraveling under the weight of their shared DNA. Before we descend deeper into this tangled web of royal blood and broken bodies, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And when the story ends, let us know in the comments, which monarch's fate haunted you the most? In this journey, we uncover the devastating effects of royal inbreeding, not just how it occurred, but what it did to those who carried the crown and the consequences written into their very flesh. Twisted jaws, fractured psyches, and crumbling empires. This is the true legacy of keeping power in the family. Inbreeding refers to reproduction between closely related individuals, siblings, cousins, even parent-child pairings. In most societies, this is taboo. But for Europe's royal dynasties, it was politics. Power had to stay concentrated, titles secured, and dowries untangled. But in the name of stability, they gambled with biology. The risk? A dramatically increased chance of inheriting genetic disorders. Scientists measure this risk through the inbreeding coefficient. 0 means no overlap, while 0.25 means genetic copies so similar it mirrors offspring of siblings. And in the name of legacy, some monarchs paid that price with their lives. Let's begin in Vienna, where marble floors echoed the footsteps of statesmen and chandeliers lit the halls of one of Europe's grandest courts. Here lived Ferdinand I of Austria, born in 1793 to parents who were double first cousins. On paper, a strong dynastic bond. In practice, a genetic time bomb. Ferdinand's body bore the cost from infancy. He suffered from hydrocephalus, which caused his skull to swell with fluid. Seizures haunted him daily. His speech was slow, his coordination fragile. Simple tasks like turning a doorknob became epic undertakings. Yet inside this trembling shell was a mind that surprised everyone. Ferdinand loved languages, studied art and nature, and kept detailed journals full of wit and curiosity. He also had a peculiar sense of humor, once famously repeating the phrase, "I am the emperor, and I want dumplings," to his court until they complied, a scene both tragic and absurd. Despite his struggles, Ferdinand was deeply beloved by the people around him, known for his sweetness and gentleness. He showed genuine affection to servants, remembered names, and maintained a childlike wonder in private moments. Still, ruling an empire required more than a gentle heart and good memory. When crowned in 1835, Ferdinand became emperor in name only. Real power shifted to a ruling council. His marriage to Maria Anna of Sardinia, a distant cousin, produced no heirs. Not by choice, but by limitation. Their life together resembled companionship more than royal partnership. In 1848, Europe ignited in revolution. Rather than stand in the way, Ferdinand quietly stepped aside. He spent the rest of his life in Prague, walking gardens and handing sweets to children. Locals called him Ferdinand the Benign. He died in 1885 at age 82, not as a failed ruler, but as a symbol of grace in the face of genetic misfortune. Next, we travel to Portugal and meet a queen whose reign began in glory and ended in madness. Maria I of Portugal, born in 1734, was the first woman to rule her country in her own right. Her bloodline, deeply intertwined with the Habsburgs, carried generations of silent fragility. To preserve succession, she married her own paternal uncle, Pedro III. While their marriage was warm, their genes were not. Of their 7 children, only a few survived infancy. The royal physicians, observing the high mortality rate among her children, began to whisper their doubts. but challenging the purity of royal blood was politically dangerous. Instead, blame was placed on omens, eclipses, or divine wrath. Maria was devout, deeply religious, and believed Lisbon's great earthquake of 1755 was divine punishment. This trauma followed her. When her husband died in 1786, followed by her children and grandson, her mind broke. She began hearing voices, claimed she was burning in hell, and banned music and laughter from the court. Diagnosed with religious mania, she was quietly removed from power in 1792. Her son ruled in her place, but Maria remained queen in name, suffering in silence. When Napoleon invaded, she was evacuated to Brazil. There, surrounded by nuns and far from her homeland, she spent her final years in a convent. But perhaps no monarch symbolizes the consequences of inbreeding more than Charles II of Spain. Born in 1661, he was the product of an uncle-niece union, but his real burden was generational. His family had been marrying relatives for so long that Charles, though not the child of siblings, had an inbreeding coefficient of 0.25, genetically equivalent to such a union. Charles's body was a map of dysfunction. He had a misshapen skull, an enlarged tongue, could not walk until age 8, and spoke only at 4. He suffered from constant infections and likely hormonal and renal disorders. Some believe he was sterile. He fathered no children. His education was another tragedy. Despite the efforts of tutors, Charles struggled with even basic arithmetic and reading comprehension. The boy king would stare blankly during council meetings, unable to follow, while courtiers debated his every word as if deciphering prophecy. Behind his back, European ambassadors described him as more of a statue than a sovereign, a passive presence manipulated by ministers and priests. When he died in 1700, his autopsy revealed shocking details: a heart the size of a peppercorn, decaying organs, and a single blackened testicle. Another tragic case is Don Carlos, son of Philip II of Spain and Maria of Portugal. Born in 1545, he had only 4 great-grandparents instead of 8. His body was twisted, limbs uneven, one leg shorter than the other, and his mind was even more unstable. As a child, he tortured animals. As a teen, he became violent, paranoid, and erratic. At court, his behavior was increasingly erratic. He became obsessed with a servant girl, ordering her imprisoned for rejecting him. During a banquet, he allegedly poured boiling oil onto a page who failed to bring his drink quickly enough. His actions weren't just cruel, they were unpredictable, terrifying even to his protectors. After a fall downstairs, doctors resorted to a barbaric surgery, trepanation, drilling into his skull. It only worsened his behavior. He tried to kill his half-brother, plotted to join the Dutch rebels, and ultimately alarmed his own father. Philip II had him arrested and confined under watch. Within 6 months, Don Carlos was dead, perhaps from illness, perhaps poison. He was just 23. And then there was the family that took inbreeding to an art form, the Habsburgs. For 500 years, they ruled across Europe, Spain, Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, and married each other like it was statecraft. Their family tree was less a tree and more a loop. The infamous Habsburg jaw, a protruding lower jaw so extreme it disfigured their faces, wasn't just a cosmetic oddity. It made chewing difficult, speech unclear, and life miserable. No one exemplified this better than Charles II. But across the dynasty, dozens of Habsburgs suffered from epilepsy, infertility, madness, and physical deformities, all in service of keeping blood noble. These monarchs, Ferdinand, Maria, Charles, Don Carlos, were born into a world that worshipped bloodlines more than biology. They were kings and queens, but also victims. Their stories are not just about power, they are about pain. About how centuries of selective breeding backfired, turning palaces into prisons. Inbreeding wasn't cruelty in their time. It was strategy. But the consequences were irreversible. Seizures, stillbirths, isolation, paranoia, and minds lost to madness. These rulers inherited more than kingdoms. They inherited centuries of misguided decisions etched into their very bones. And perhaps, in remembering them not just as monarchs, but as humans trapped by duty and DNA, we finally honor what history forgot, their suffering.